just a few short lists from the Bible, what can go wrong? The Bible records natural disasters, man-made threats, floods, famines, fires, earthquakes, epidemics, plagues, persecution, riots, thefts, wars. And that's just some of what can go wrong in a field. And of course, it wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And Lot's wife should have taken the angel seriously when they said, don't look back. Joseph was warned in a dream to prepare for the 7 years of famine by using the 7 years of plenty to build up stores to survive. Pharaoh's chariots were foolish to follow into God's ambush, and they got wiped out in the Red Sea. The walls of Jericho collapsing. It reminds you that when Joshua met the man standing with drawn sword outside the city, he said, are you on our side or on your side of our enemies? And the response was, neither. As commander of the Lord of hosts, I've come. And this is a Christophany, a pre-incarnational appearance of Christ. We read that Joshua fell on his knees and worshipped, and he was not told, don't worship me, I'm an angel. This isn't an angel of the Lord, this is the angel of the Lord, this is the Lord himself. And he took off his shoes. He was on holy ground. Of course, enemies have besieged and enslaved God's people and exiled them, like the Syrians taking northern Israel captive. The destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 was one of the most catastrophic events in history. Destruction of the temple, the greatest building in the world at that time. There was nothing in Rome to compare with it. The destruction of the temple was a pivotal point, an absolute end of an era. Of course, persecution for the Christians in Rome. There were 10 waves of persecution. But Psalm 46 gives us balance. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear. Though the earth give way, though the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, and the mountains quake with their surging. We need to fear God, not man. But we need to make preparation for things that can happen. This is how it was under Rhodesia. This is the same farmhouse today under Zimbabwe. What can go wrong? A lot can go wrong. But Proverbs 22 verse 3 says, the prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and suffer for it. We are told in Proverbs 3:25, have no fear of sudden disaster, or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked, for the Lord will be your confidence. But then Proverbs 6 verse 6 says, go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It stores its provisions in summer. It gathers its food at harvest. So learn from the ant. Be prepared. Prepare in times of plenty or in times of summer, harvest, because the times of winter will come. Noah and his family are exhibit A of preparedness. To have taken decades to prepare the ark, stocked it, provisioned it, that's a lot of hard work. That's biblical faith, even if you did have the help of an odd elephant. And so Noah's Ark is a classic example of preparedness. You don't know what's going to come. Listen to the guidance of the Holy Spirit and be prepared. A lot of hard work. But Noah's Ark not only saved humankind, but every type of animal for the future. So Christians are to wisely anticipate danger and to make provision for times of scarcity. We're not to fear the future, we're to fear God alone. Yet we are warned to plan for the future and to prepare ourselves for adversity. Man is born to trouble as surely as the sparks fly upwards. If you falter in times of trouble, how small is your strength? You know the flavor of a tea bag when it gets into hot water. We must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. We read in Acts 14 verse 22. 2 Corinthians 4 verse 8 says, we are hard pressed on every side, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but we are not in despair. We are persecuted, but not abandoned. We are struck down, but we are not destroyed. One translation said, we are knocked down, but we are not knocked out. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, sometimes people make bad decisions and they're stupid. You know, you don't drive into a harbor in order to take a boat and you back into the harbor. But anyway, where did I put my handbag and the groceries? Can you imagine? Where's my handbag? Yeah, you know, looking for the keys, let's just hang it on the mirror for a while. On the road to success, there are no shortcuts. Yeah? Join our team. Yeah, sometimes engineers make mistakes. And then you wonder what on earth the builders were thinking. This is not going to end well. And then there are some very dumb things that people do. Thinking ahead. Sometimes the staircase to success meets the ceiling. So, yeah, planning ahead would help. I don't know how the car's meant to get in there, but anyway. Can you imagine? These are some exhibit A's of stupidity. But duct tape can solve a lot. You don't have a roof rack, don't worry, if you've got duct tape. And then you get all sorts of strange motorcycles. No front tire, no problem, we can get some bicycle tires. Make a plan. Why not be comfortable? What happens when a motorbike in front stops?
Oh, no.
Yeah, but some people are good at balancing. You know, sometimes you just got to make a plan, okay? You don't have much space, but let's see if we can do it in one trip. I've actually seen things like this in Nigeria in particular. People doing the most amazing things on their motorbikes. And then you get the Kawasaki. Kawasaki motorbike, yeah. You can't believe what you can see on the road in North Africa. And sometimes cars are overloaded. I can guarantee you this bakkie is not going to last long. And this vehicle is tired. Aye. How much is too much? They heard about Biden's open borders. Yeah. And by the way, when you have a technical problem with your computer, you phone a technician in this country to get advice.
They will solve your back problems as well. It is too overloaded.
I've traveled on these buses in Malawi, and I was sitting on the highest point, you know, just over the rear wheel, and the whole window came loose at one point. And I had a large African woman next to me sort of pushing me out the side of the window. Other vehicles are coming past and sand's pouring in. We're on dirt roads, and it was I was holding on to the seat in front of me for my dear life. These African buses will improve your prayer life. Okay, how do we get into some situations? Now this one happened right here. We were finishing a Reformation Society meeting, and I heard sirens, lots of sirens, including coming down Milner Road, and police sirens. On the way home, saw this. My son here, he came first on the occasion at the bridge. The police bakkie on a car chase went off the bridge and crashed in the intersection right where we would normally go under the bridge to turn to go to Pines. And he helped these chaps out. And that was just part of the kind of accident we've had here. Once I heard so many sirens here, Milner Road and Park Road, and then crash, 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 and just carried on, endless crashes. What happened is there's a high-speed chase from Plumstead after car thieves, and the police intersected here, and a police car coming up Park Road, sideswiped the car, and the hijackers went out of control, spun into a whole lot of other cars, and walked outside. It was like a war zone. The whole of the intersection here was just smashed vehicles all over the place, and some very happy-looking policemen standing over some criminals who were face down in the tar with guns pressed against their necks, and they had destroyed who knows how many cars, but they caught these car thieves, and they were super pleased with themselves. That's the kind of thing that does happen. So what can go wrong on a mission? Well, you can get bombed. You can have a problem trying to get your vehicle out of the river that's overflowed. You might have to face a bridge like this. We had a frontline team in Western Zambia that had to cross this bridge. Would you drive onto this bridge?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. If it's your vehicle, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
But these guys thought they could risk it with a missions vehicle.
Did they cross it?
They actually did. They made it, yeah. And then, I remember this, it was massive floods we had back in 2014. And this is, in Mpumalanga. And interestingly, there's a police roadblock stopping the vehicles going on. And a taxi came screaming along, swerved around the police, went in, and they got to the middle, and then the whole combi turned on its side, turned upside down, and just kept floating down the river. I think it probably ended up in the Indian Ocean somewhere. Probably went through Mozambique without clearing customs. When you have floods like that, it's wise not to stop. This is Durban. As you can see, they're not used to these kind of floods, and I don't think the drainage was that well cleaned. This happens. What can go wrong? You can be stuck on the road. Believe it or not, statistically, the most dangerous thing missionaries do is drive on the road. More missionaries die from vehicle accidents than anything else. Forget snakes and scorpions and diseases. Car accidents account for most missionary deaths. One missionary we lost in the field was through a head-on collision. That was Anthony Duncan back in 1994. Horrible event. We sent 4 vehicles, 4 teams into the field, and only 1 vehicle came back. That was the vehicle I was driving. Had to go on a roundabout tour to pick up the survivors of other vehicles. Each team, one team got ambushed and imprisoned in Angola. Another team had a horrible vehicle accident, literally rolled the vehicle, and another vehicle had a head-on collision. I had the only bakkie left, and we had a trailer on top, a trailer being towed behind, another trailer upside down on a roof. 6 people crammed into a bakkie, a 1600 diesel bakkie, the front bench, and then everyone else in the back of the bakkie. But anyway, things can go wrong. You don't want to break down where there's flat dogs. In Rhodesia, we call these flat dogs, or mobile handbags. But in the water, they own the water. Expect some wildlife on the roads. And let me tell you, these guys are big. First rule of the road in Africa, elephants have right of way. I was told this in all seriousness at school. And elephants have a right to scratch. And if your polo is going to help his tummy, then that's the way it is.
That is like an answer.
Yeah, well, you can imagine people in there are probably learning to pray. And in your camp, remember, it's his territory.
Yeah.
We just visited. And another rule of the road, do not cross a solid yellow line in the middle of the road. And you get roadblocks and you get line blocks. Okay, and the lines have right of way. And if you want to go faster, they can give you motivation. Now, if a lion's coming at you like this, it'll make all the difference in the world if you know him. And if he's a friend, and if he considers you part of his pride. So imagine the day when the Lord comes, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, when he arrives, you want to know you're on his side. You want to know that you're part of his pride. And this is lions tackling, so the lions 1, Nalas 0. Now, I've seen this kind of look when my wife's been shopping and spots the target. You know, don't get in their way. When lioness has acquired the target, you move away. You can get a close-up view of wildlife. Okay, can you spot the leopard?
Yeah, I can.
Good, because if you don't see the leopard, he will see you. This is fast food. Notice this guy putting on the brakes, notice that chap swerving. Leopards are faster than fast food. And if you didn't know it, leopards are stronger than crocodiles. Or in this case, a caiman. Comes the same thing. We once had a couple of rhinos following us for miles. We were hiking in the Magaliesberg, and these rhinos just took a liking and followed us through the bush. And everyone with us was quite nervous, and Lenora was nervous. And one big argument we got into once, Lenora had a dream that a lion attacked us and I didn't protect her. And she comes to the next morning angry at me because I didn't protect her in the dream. And so she said, but you would shoot the lion if you had to. I said, Lenora, lions don't attack people. And if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. Yeah, but if it did attack me, and I just didn't give her the satisfaction, and so she was so angry at me about something that didn't happen, which was in a dream. And she was also at this point wondering, would I shoot at the rhinos if they were threatening? I said, but they won't threaten us if we just treat them with respect. And there was this concern that, do you love me enough to protect me from rhino? Well, of course I'd do my best to talk them out of it and push them back. But she was so concerned that, you would never shoot an animal for me. And, well, I'd do anything to protect my loved ones, but I must say on that one, I just courted the argument by not giving the satisfactory answer. Now, if you hear a knock at the back door, you might want to look out the window first, because there's some strange things going on in Africa. And if you want to know, the scorpions of the big clippers are not poisonous, it's like a bee sting. And this guy, not at all, see, he's got the small tail. The really dangerous one is the thin clippers, but the big thick tail. That's the poison. The poison's in the tail. So it's not the clippers that's the problem, it's the tail. I've gotten bitten by the one on the left, the transparent, luminous type of characters that glow in the dark up in Nuba Mountains. And when that happened, we were hundreds of kilometers from a hospital. We were about 5 hours flying time from the nearest hospital. We didn't have a plane either. So I would have been dead by then. So all I could do was call for the pastors to pray for me in accordance with James chapter 5, the prayer of faith and all of that. And I could feel this poison going up my arm towards my heart. Being bitten in my hand, and literally as I was being prayed for, I felt the poison draining out my arm and out my fingers. Such a dramatic answer to prayer. And you want to know the Lord and you want to know the healing hand of the Lord. Expect bad roads. There's some potholes you could get your vehicle lost in. We've gone some very bad roads. Just look what it does to our tires. There are times that we're digging out the vehicle, hours after hours of trying to get through just a few kilometers. And if you complain about roads in the Transvaal, try Sudan. Notice, that's a road, that's a bridge, and that's a road. River, road. See the difference? Expect challenges like aerial bombardments. Of course, big forest fires can happen. Fires in town, fires urban, rural. You can expect a lot of rocks on the road. Now, this is what they call a protest. They're throwing a lot of rocks on the road so that you can't drive over without ripping the underside of your vehicle. Unless you've got a serious four-wheel drive with high clearance. That happens. Bad weather happens. Long roads, ambush alley. This is going into Sudan. And what do you see? Shot out vehicles ahead of you. See the bullet holes in the windscreen? We saw no signs of people, so presumably this vehicle got shot up and that's it. No more people in the vehicle. When you see the tanks didn't make it, hard-skinned vehicles didn't make it, and you're in a soft-skinned vehicle, that will revive your prayer life. If you want a revived prayer life, go into the fields where they've got ambushes. You will pray like you've never prayed before. And yet our vehicle survived. We've gotten up there and down. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you're in a war zone, don't have the windows up and the radio or the music on. Our team didn't hear the jet. Didn't hear anything, just suddenly heard and felt the explosion as the bomb exploded on the road and the vehicle swerved to the side, almost as a tree. That's what happens when you're oblivious. Windows up, air conditioning on, music playing. And the team didn't know what hit them. So I wasn't in the vehicle at that time. That was actually Stephen. He was driving and he was absolutely addicted to his aircon and his music. Window up and all that, so not a good idea. This vehicle obviously got hit. Expect opposition. There's a surprising amount of people who don't like what you say. Of course, there are tolerant Muslim jihadists from the religion of peace. You can just feel the tolerance. And so there's some people distributing peace and tolerance around the world, like Boko Haram up in Nigeria. And if you can't read Arabic, they've even put a summary in English for you. So that Boko Haram have attacked 1,000 churches in northern Nigeria in just a 5-year period, killing 17,000 Christians in 5 years, just in northern Nigeria. But don't worry, Hillary Clinton says they're force for peace and toleration. You should expect persecution. We've been under fire in churches. We've had churches bombed, the birthplace of Christianity in southern Sudan. When you look at what shrapnel did to these trees, you can imagine what it might do to you. So when bombing takes place, you want to be lying flat. You don't want to be standing up and you don't want to be running around. The amount of times you've got in the movies, the hero outrunning explosions, even in the tunnel, diving off into the harbor as the explosion goes off. You cannot run, dive, or anything faster than the explosion of shrapnel. And so the idea that you can outrun an explosion is insane. The best thing you can do is lie flat. The shrapnel hopefully will go up and out, and if you're lying flat, you could survive a hit from even just a few meters away. But you will not survive standing up or running 100 meters away from the point of impact. So there's some very, very foolish people out there running around like chickens with their heads cut off when there's a bombing. And to get the people to go down, you know, some of these techniques I showed you how to kick a person behind the knee and bring them down. You've got to do it sometimes with American missionaries who are with you to stop them running while they're running during a bombing, like get down, you know, take the guy down, pull him down, you've got to sweep them down over your leg, whatever, so that they're not standing upright when the bomb goes off. And churches we've ministered in throughout Sudan, I've ministered about 1,000 times in Sudan, 1,200 times. I've never been in one church or school that hadn't been bombed at least once. One church I ministered had been bombed 18 times in a 12-month period. So you want to be alert. One of the things I say to our teams before we go in the field is, do not take anything into the field that you're not willing to lose. And that includes your own life. Whatever you take to the field, you've got to be willing to lose. So make sure you've got backups of that information, that data, whatever it is, because you have no guarantee you're going to bring it out again. Like when bombs land near us, but this one did not explode. Expect illness. When we were locked up in Lusaka Central, this is the kind of conditions. We were crammed in 60 to 65 people in a cell. That's 25 feet by 15 feet. No bedding, no pillows, no bunks, no structure at all. You're just lying on the concrete. And like sardines, you can't lie on your back. There's only space to lie on your side. If one person turns over, everyone's got to turn over. Yeah. That was Lusaka Central. Now this picture was posed later because of course we didn't have cameras when we were locked up. But it was worse than this. This is a happy post picture, so it's nowhere near as bad as what it really was. The Lusaka Central Prison was repainted when I took this picture, but corrugated iron roof, not very nice. We entered through the narrow door, and the prison cells were not air conditioned at all. They didn't even have any electricity, no plumbing, only buckets. Buckets, that's the only way of getting any water in or out of the prison. No plumbing in the whole prison. Stinking disease factory. We were in cell 11. That's where the presidential detainees were kept. Death row was over on the right-hand side. The cooking shed was in the middle. No utensils, no knives, no forks, no spoons. No bowls, no plates. They dished up the slop on your hands. That's it. Had to eat out of your hands. There was no eating utensils at all. Machine gun tower in the middle. Main entrance on this side. But what does the Bible say? Before we were arrested and imprisoned in Zambia, I read Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is a stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evil men advance against me to devour my flesh, when my enemies and my foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war breaks out against me, even then I will be confident. Be on your guard, we are told. Stand firm in the faith. Be men of courage. Be strong. So many commands in the Bible to be strong and to be prepared. Now, the principles for protection are mental, emotional, and spiritual. It's not just practical. You've got to have the right mindset. There's an incident that happened in the US Air Force. They were doing training in the Arctic North, near Alaska, and one of the pilots, for some reason, had to bail out. There was engine failure, whatever. He bailed out the ejection seat, not like what poor Ian Smith had in the Second World War. Ian Smith explained when he was shot down in northern Italy, he had to flip his Spitfire upside down, release the canopy, release his seatbelts, fall upside down, and when he was clear of the plane, then he could pull his ripcord. You can't practice that. And that's like a once-off option. And no ejection seats in the old days. So anyway, this American pilot has an ejection seat. You just pull the ejection seat, release, and you go shooting up by booster rockets, you clear of the plane, and then the parachute deploys automatically. You don't even have to pull a ripcord. And he lands in the Arctic area now. It's absolutely frozen, it's freezing, it's below freezing, it's absolutely cold. And he's got all the survival equipment you would need. He's got the training. But the man, and it took only 20 minutes for the relief helicopter to reach him. When they reached him, he is dead. He shot himself with his own service pistol. He didn't have the mental stamina to survive. He had all the physical means, he even had the support, he even had a helicopter coming to rescue him, and he ended his life because he couldn't face the crisis he's in. That's the problem. You get people who've got everything physically, but they don't have it mentally or emotionally. You've got to have the right mental and emotional attitude to survive. Survival is an attitude as well. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Greater is he who is in me than him who is in the world. To our God we shall do valiantly. It is he who will tread down our enemies. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. So the will to win, the determination, the resilience, the fighting spirit is basic to survival. It's not your equipment as much as your attitude. Trouble or hardship or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or the sword. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. That's got to be our attitude. Now, there are 5 C's of survival. What are the 5 C's of survival? Anyone know? Well, here you've seen one, which is cover. Calm spirit, that could help. But they're actually talking about equipment. So there are 5 C's, and then there's even the 10 C's, so at least the 5 C's. One is cover, and by cover they mean a cap, not a full canopy or poncho, which is very helpful too. But at the very basics, you need a cap. So some of the C's you need is like, you need a cutting instrument, like a knife, okay? You need cordage or rope, because you always need to be able to tie things up, bag things together, being able to move, whether you're talking about large amounts of water, whatever. We've got to have cordage. You need some combustion. How do you start a fire? Like a big lighter or rod that you can strike up, much better than having your rubbing sticks together and stones and all that. Of course, you also need some kind of candling or torch. Those are some of the C's. So cutting instrument, I would put a cap here as well. That's important. There's other sort of a variety of cutting tools you might want to have when you're traveling, maybe in your bakkie, that you've got a variety of good cutting tools. I always like my axe, a knife. Okay, you need a means of conveyance, like having your backpack, something to a container. So one C is a container, another C is cutting tools, combustion to start fires. Fires are very, very helpful, both for cooking and keeping warm and chasing away mosquitoes. And there's a range of other options. I mean, this is a well-equipped kit. And even more things you can take for survival. Equipment helps, but the attitude is more important. Now, these are just pictures you get in the Security and Survival Handbook, which we've got on the table back there. And you'll see I've got a whole lot of pictures of the things that you can use there. Interesting, I mean, this chap's even got a spade, he's got a variety of pistols, he's got a variety of knives, cords, catapults, that's interesting. Even that can be helpful. Of course, yes, thank you. You'll see there's a bunch of these in here with all kinds of pictures at the back on different equipment you can take. But we need to be prepared for action, ready. You never know what's going to happen next, but to be prepared. So, you also want to do your physical workout, your PT, like these lions doing the pull-ups, okay? You've got to be strong. So pull-ups, push-ups. We won't be as fit as a leopard, but leopards are the ultimate example of super strong, super fit, super stealthy. They can run up a tree. I mean, forget about climbing. Totally vertical, and they can run up. Just amazing. So I should give a story about the importance of having a knife. So I will always have a knife. The Bible says, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. I think having a knife with you is very, very helpful at all times. An example, a father in America was in the shopping mall with his daughter, and she was wearing a long scarf. And the scarf got caught into the escalator. And so as it got to the end, the escalator kept going, and she was choking, and he's asking security people, do you have a knife? Nobody had a knife. Anyone passing by, nobody had a knife. He didn't have a knife. Before they managed to switch off the escalator, his daughter was dead. She had gotten strangled by her own scarf and the escalator in the shopping mall. Hordes of people around, not one person had a knife, for goodness sakes. How many times are you in a situation as, does everyone have a knife? Does anyone have a pen? Does anyone have a clue? It's so many helpless people out there. Men should always have a pen, they should always have a knife. And of course, they should always have a handkerchief. My wife insisted that I always have a lot of good, clean handkerchiefs that you never use, the only purpose of which is to offer a woman when she's crying. And as I've gotten a lot of women crying, works here at the Mission Church will tell you, it's important to have a clean handkerchief that you never use, that you can offer at the right time. But the knife's the important thing. Another example, I was with a family in America, and they were telling me the most tragic story. Now, the man had 3 children at the time, and they were moving to Tennessee. So they were from Pennsylvania and moving to his wife's parents, in other words, his in-laws' farm. And they had built a nice new house for them there. And they just painted it. So they drove all the way from Pennsylvania and they painted up the inside of the house. But you can't sleep in a house that's just been painted. So they're heading off to the B&B or whatever for the night. And they're in 2 vehicles because the husband's got a couple of helpers from the church, young men who are coming to help with the painting and the moving. So he's in the advanced car and his wife's with the children in the vehicle behind. And as they're driving out, there's a pond, just a duck pond or goose pond, something like that. But it didn't have a railing or guides around, and the road had to go around it. So he goes around this and he's driving on. Now his wife's following his taillights, but the thing is, the taillights are, if she follows the taillights, she'll go straight into the pond. It's not a very deep pond, it's not a big pond, but it's cold. It's January, it's winter, and the thing's icy and frozen. So there's no cat's eyes, there's no barrier, there's no guidance for the road. So she's following the taillights in front and doesn't notice that the road is actually more to the left. She's moving to the right and gets onto the slopey gravel, and the whole vehicle starts to slide sideways into the water. And she sounds the hooter to or what the Americans call a horn, to attract your husband's attention, flicks the light. He looks at his rearview mirror and he sees the rear car light disappearing down the slope into the pond. So he immediately reverses, gets out the vehicle, rushes, tries to help. Now, the moment they hit the water, it's icy, icy, icy cold. She's so frozen, she can't even undo her seatbelt or unlock the door. She's absolutely paralyzed in shock at the cold of the water. And so the car's in the water, the doors are still locked. The little children and babies are strapped into the car seats in the back. A younger child is in the front seat. He tries to open the doors. He can't open the doors. He can't break the windows. If he had a knife, he could just smash the window easily with just a bit of a sharp point of the knife. A bit of metal would help. So he's floundered around to find a rock to break the windows. In the end, he manages to break open the back window with a rock. And then by that point, the whole car is turned upside down. The car's upside down in the water, so the people are underwater. He manages to climb in the back window. He rescues his wife. She's already unconscious. So he starts to do CPR on his wife, and he had to make a choice. Does he save his wife, or does he try and rescue the children? He saved his wife. His two of his three children drowned in the vehicle. Because even when the others with him tried to get to the children, they couldn't release the seatbelts. Now, if they had a knife, they could have just cut through the seatbelts. But nobody had a knife. Not one of the three males there had a knife. Absolutely stunningly shocking. I've had so many people rebuke me, why do you always carry a knife? Why do you have your children carrying a knife? Why do you give your grandchildren a knife? A knife can save lives. It always used to be the whole motto of the Scouts, be prepared. And the symbol of being prepared was what we put on our, what we put on our cover of the Security and Survival Handbook, a Swiss Army knife. This used to be the symbol of the Scouts, be prepared. So absolutely shocking that nobody had a knife, and two precious little children died as a result of lack of preparedness. Quite aside from the fact that the Bible does say we should have barriers, and if you've got a roof, you must have a barricade around the roof. You must have fences around the roof, just like you should have fences around a swimming pool today. If a child wanders into the pool, they might get drowned. So we used to have laws in the Bible that you had to have a barricade around the roof because people did a lot of their social activities on the roof. Somebody could fall off. So there's thoughts of being safety conscious, not causing injury, being a good neighbor. And these are just some of the practical points that I want you to remember. So if you've always got a knife with you, that'll really help. Having a pen and paper does help. You just never know when you're going to need it. Of course, knowing how to use it does help, but a knife can save lives. Being prepared. So there's a whole range of practical things in the Security and Survival Handbook. That's part of the Great Commission course. We'll get into that during GC side more as well. Tomorrow we're going to go to Newlands Forest. We're going to do some basic practicals. So what's your most urgent thing when it comes to survival? Second most, but not the most, yes. No, you can live 3 weeks without food. You may not think so, but scientifically, a normal person can live 3 weeks without food. You can live 3 days without water. And you can live 3 minutes without air. So air is your first priority. The first priority is to have fresh air. Now, of course, if you're underwater, a snorkel, oxygen tank would help. But if you've got somebody who's unconscious, your first priority is to get them breathing, obviously. Air is your first priority. Water is your second priority. Food is your third priority. And then shelter. You need shelter from the elements. And that can be in the right kind of clothing, like thick jackets and raincoats and all of the rest. But air and water, those are the two most important. Now, you could be in the middle of the desert, in the heat of the sun, in the middle of the day, and maybe you'll expire quicker if you don't have water in the desert. But it's a rough rule of thumb. 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air. I mean, that shows you your highest priority. So in the field, we've got to get water. You don't need to worry about food. You don't need to, in survival, think, my first priority is trapping or hunting some animals and getting some food. If you come from normal background, you can manage for 3 weeks or more. I mean, Jesus managed 40 days without food in the wilderness. So obviously you can get some people lasting longer or shorter, depending. But your priority, if you can get water, that's great. Food is not a high priority if you're lost and stuck in the forest or desert for a while. That can come later. So when you're thinking survival, getting some way of purifying water is more important. And if you've got a water purification system like we've had in the field, where we pump through a ceramic filter, and that's excellent. We could take mud water and turn it to good, drinkable, healthy water. But if you don't have that, there are ways that you've got to know how do you purify water if you're in the bush. So we'll go to Newlands Forest, we'll do some of that. One of the practicals tomorrow afternoon is going to be building a shelter. We've done some before, but building a shelter in the forest using available materials, what's available. So we're going to think in terms of that. How do we purify water if you're in the field and you've got water and you don't think it's very sanitary? Well, one thing is if you've got a handkerchief, like the handkerchief you've kept in case this woman needs a handkerchief, you can pour the water through the handkerchief into a bottle, and from one bottle to another sort of thing. You've got one scooping out of the river, and just the handkerchief itself, if it's clean, should filter it quite well and get the worst out. Now, if it's really still questionable because you're close to habitation, that won't be a problem in Newlands Forest. There's no habitation above it. It's good mountain water. But if you are living in an area where you're afraid the water's polluted, then you might need to build a fire and boil the water. Boil it for about 20 minutes, that'll kill all the bacteria. And then, of course, you've got to let it cool before you can drink it, obviously. And you can't just put it in the fridge because, believe it or not, there are no fridges in the middle of the wilderness. And then you can drink it. But that's one way. Another way I've come across is people putting sand, perfectly clean sand, in a trouser leg, tying the trouser leg at the bottom. You pour the contaminated water through the trouser leg, goes through the sand and through the cloth. What comes out the other side should be pretty clean. They've also tried...
Shirt as well? Maybe a shirt?
Your shirt could work. You could also put rocks and sand and little bits of stones for it to pour through. That forms a primitive filter, but that'll probably get all the dirt and gunk and garbage out. But boiling water is a very effective way. But again, you've got to get wood, you've got to make fire. Learning how to make fire in the forest is something we're not allowed to do tomorrow, so we'll do that over here at some stage.
If you had some charcoal maybe from a previous fire and you put it there, maybe that would also help?
I think that can, yes, that helps in purifying. So we've got to think how to purify water, how to make a shelter, how to, and when you're trying to build something, having some cordage, some rope, like para rope would help, and a knife. A knife will be so important. If you don't have a knife, you've got to find a stone that you can sharpen. Then another stone you sort of chip, and you can make a knife from stones, but that takes time. How much easier just to carry a knife? So these are some survival practicals we've got to think of. But to be prepared, and the amount of times it happens that the one person who has a knife can make a difference. And the other people, what they're doing, I don't know what any man is doing walking around without a knife. If Jesus said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one, we don't have any excuse. We should be equipped. I tend to like having these jackets because these jackets are good for all sorts of things. So I've got my torch and a whole range of things just ready here. Of course, you've got to have your New Testaments give people tracts. So a jacket like this is already a carrier. It's not as good as a backpack, but it's with you and you can carry a lot of things in it. Now, sometimes you're in the middle of the forest and you lost or you need to find the other people. And so having a whistle does help. So, okay, you've got a whistle as needed. And again, much better than just shouting. You got a quick whistle, someone's got a place to identify. A torch will help at night. A whistle will help almost any time, day or night. These are sort of things that can assist when you're in the field, but you do want to have a hat. The amount of times I've seen survival films or something like that, and a person's walking along, and they, water bottle, it's empty, shakes it, throws it away. What's going to happen if he comes across a water source in the next few meters? Got to go back and get his water bottle. Why throw an empty water bottle away? It's helpful. When you find a water source, you're going to have to fill up your water bottle. If you don't have a container, you're not doing well. But even more bizarre, how many of these heroes in the middle of the desert and so on are wandering around without a hat? If you don't have a hat, you won't last as long. A hat can make a big difference between your survivability. So making sure you got a cap with you, a hat. Broad hat is better than a cap. But, I mean, even on Saturday when we were out doing outreaches, I still got sunburnt even though I was wearing a hat. And the backs of my hands are very sunburnt. So you've got to think about how to protect your skin. If you don't have sun cream and you're in the bush, you can smear mud on. That's what the elephants do. Mud bath, that'll protect your skin from insects and from sunburn. What you mustn't do is wander around without a hat. And again, you get these people throwing their hat down and all that sort of thing, and they're wandering into the wilderness. How are they going to lost in the middle of a desert or something without a hat? So think security. There's a range of these good tools. Very easy to get hold of. This one here, by the way, is a water purifying straw. I've got one of those where you can literally suck polluted water out and it'll be filtered by the time it gets to your lips. So a purifying straw. Those are useful. What are other good, useful things here? I see that they've got, of course, duct tape, matches, keeping matches in a waterproof container. Sometimes we've got these matches, we put wax around them to protect them from getting wet. And the wax, of course, you can rub that off. And then you've got your match that's ready to ignite. That does help. There's a range of useful things. Of course, a compass is very helpful. Know which direction you're going. Here's the sort of fire starters. Good fire starter. It's amazing how often you do need a spade. Spades are useful, but we can't all walk around with a spade. I've got some collapsible, foldable spades that I put in my survival backpack. When we go in the field, we have a sort of survival bag that we keep with us. So that if you suddenly separate from your team, which can happen. Frank, didn't you once get abandoned by your team, left behind in Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe.
Being left behind by a team is pretty miserable. They take the vehicle and you're, bye.
On your way home.
Yep, that is miserable. That's when you want your survival bag with you.
Yeah.
Your bag of tricks that could just make the difference between surviving and not surviving. Notice, repellent. For people who attract insects, like me, nice to have some kind of form of repellent. They've got a few emergency kit things. See some radio, I think that's some form of GPS. So communications help. And this is very American. I mean, this is quite luxurious. I don't think many South Africans would ever have something this well equipped. But this is more my kind of survival kit. It's all color-coded too, which is nice. But yes, a little pouch with just a few survival things in can make a big difference. And I think in this orange bit here would be the waxed matches. Fire really helps. It's a morale booster when you're cold and wet to be able to make a fire. So if you've got the way of being able to create a fire professionally, that's fine. But the Bix light is a cheap, easy way of doing it. As we don't smoke, we don't tend to have them, but it's very useful to have it in your backpack. Notice the extra batteries for the torch. Always useful because the torch does run out of battery power at a very inconvenient time. Do you see also there's some cutting instrument here? It's actually a saw, but that you've got two rings with your fingers so you can actually cut things just by friction going backwards and forwards. I've got those also in my packs. They're kind of useful. You wouldn't normally expect that. Any other suggestions, comments, questions?
I think using a fixed blade is the best type of blade for the wild, instead of
Yes.
a curved blade.
That is true. If you've got it, in fact, when I'm in the bush, I've always got my long fixed blade, but you can't carry it everywhere in the city and so on. So this is not as good as a fixed blade, but what you've got with you is better than the good thing you've got sitting back at home. So yes, when you go on a field trip, a fixed blade knife is definitely preferable. I've used my Gerber a lot in the field. So,
Also a space blanket, which you can roll it up.
yeah, I think they've got a few space blanket things here too. Very useful. Notice just an empty bottle. Now, I don't think you carry necessarily an empty bottle, but it's good to have an empty bottle. Of course, a full one is better, but because when you come to a river, you can fill it up. The idea that you would throw away a good water bottle makes no sense at all. Only Hollywood heroes do that. The other thing I noticed with Hollywood is they love it that they run out of bullets, they throw the gun away. You know, that's insane. You might just come across some ammunition next week and battlefield scavenge. Why throw a perfectly good weapon away just because you run out of rounds? And even if you run out of rounds, don't you have a spare magazine? One should always have a spare magazine. But if you don't, you could maybe get some from the enemy, which is another reason why I think 9mm is good, because everyone uses 9mm. Police, army, terrorists, enemy. So you can battlefield scavenge.
Or you could scare someone with it, even if it's empty. They might think it's good.
Well, that's also true. They don't know it's empty. So the idea of just throwing it away makes no sense. So here are these heroes walking in the desert, throwing away the water bottle, throwing away their hat, throwing away their gun, and just really and truly, they're not valuable to them. Well, I suppose if the film set provided, that's one thing, but no sane human being who's bought this is going to throw away good equipment. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, so being prepared, you can only start small, but even if you start very small, little side pouch with a few key survival things. You know, think Robinson Crusoe. Poor guy had to learn from scratch all sorts of things, how to make fire, how to make shelter. If you've got some of these things compact and you can carry them, it'll solve a lot of problems when you're there. But the simplest survival tool is a knife. If you've got a knife, you can make bark for sandals out of baobab tree bark. You can make rope from bits and pieces of twine that you find in the field, and you can wrap together, but you've got to cut it first to be able to work with these things. There's a lot of things you can improvise in the field. Even how the Bushmen would take an ostrich egg and they'd use that as a water container. So we can improvise with what's in the field. There's a lot you can get in the field. If you just take a baobab tree, the top of the baobab tree almost always has some water. Probably very stagnant, but if you've got a means of purification, you can get something pretty good from that. If there's a cactus plant, you could get moisture from that, but you need a knife to be able to take off those chunks of the cactus to be able to drink from, and so on. Ease out some kind of liquid. There's bulbs and roots of some plants that you can pull up that you can get some moisture out of, bring a little bit out, even by just shavings. But again, a knife is essential.
Sometimes they also take a plastic bag, wrap it around leaves, and then leave it for a day, and then it actually condenses and water forms in the
Yes,
plastic.
you'll see you can make a bit of a hollow and put the plastic in a cup in the middle, and it will actually harvest some dew in the morning and things like that. Yeah, no, there are a lot of survival things, but there are tools that will save your time. And if you want to improvise everything, if you want to go in the bush and then, okay, I'm going to make my own knife with sharpening stones, well, that'll take a while and it won't be as efficient. How much easier just to carry with you a knife at all times?
You remember when they were sharing, so basically 45 degrees, trying to keep your water bottle cool. We had some ingenious methods that was rags in that wrapped around the bottle, and you keep them cool with water in that.
Yes.
You keep your water cool.
And we used to like having it hanging over even the front bump of your buggy, and it's moist and it's getting a lot of airflow, and that keeps it pretty cool. Those kind of sackings around your water bottles was a standard way in the bush in Rhodesia of people keeping their water somewhat coolish. Okay, any other observations, questions? You'll see some interesting tools in our display cabinets over here.
Is there a certain color code for the outdoors? Color code, your clothing.
Oh, our clothing. Well, okay, if you're going to be operating at night, like I do a lot of my cross-border activities in the dark, crossing the border at night is great because most people are asleep once the sun sets. They're not patrolling at night, they're scared of the dark, they're scared of insects, they're scared of snakes, all sorts of things like that. So operating at night means you've got less chance of detection, they can't see you from a distance and so on. So I tend to use a lot of black, but of course green and khaki are good colors too. Green, khaki, black are ideal for stealth colors. Of course, black during the day in the bush is going to be unpleasantly hot. It's attracting heat. Khaki is the best color in many ways. Not at night, but during the daytime, khaki is an ideal color. It's not as hot. Also, we've seen that tsetse flies are attracted to dark colors, blues and blacks. But if you're wearing khaki, you're less likely to have the tsetse fly target you. So, generally speaking, there's a good reason why you wear khaki in the bush.
Also, don't have camouflage, like some of your
American type of hunting, camping things.
Don't go with that because you recognize as a government pupils.
Yeah, wearing camo in the field makes you look like a belligerent, a combatant, or a terrorist or mercenary or something like that. And so we'd avoid camouflage like the plague. Specifically in Africa, that's not a good idea. Maybe it's a clever idea for some people. Maybe they are traveling in Antarctica or up in Alaska and they find camouflage. Obviously, winter camouflage is a good idea, but I wouldn't do any camouflage in Africa whatsoever. Onderkennungsstandige.